They had it all: fame, money, adoration from millions. But success in the 1970s came with a price that many couldn't pay. Some fell to addiction. Some lost their fortunes. Some simply couldn't handle the pressure. These were the brightest stars of the decade, and they burned out spectacularly. In this video, we're going to explore 10 music icons from 1970s who lost everything. Number 10. Elvis Presley.
We can't go on together with suspicious minds.
Elvis Presley seemed invincible. He was the king of rock and roll, the biggest star in the world. But by the mid-1970s, Elvis was struggling. His marriage to Priscilla had ended in 1972. He was gaining weight. He was becoming increasingly dependent on prescription medications. What had once been pills prescribed for legitimate purposes had become an addiction. By the later 1970s, Elvis was a shadow of his former self.
And we can't build our dreams on suspicious.
Elvis continued performing, but his shows became increasingly unreliable. He would sometimes forget lyrics. His performances lacked the energy they once had. People close to him reported that he was taking enormous quantities of prescription drugs daily. His doctor was apparently enabling this behavior by prescribing more and more medication. The entire situation was destructive and unsustainable. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died at his Graceland mansion. He was only 42 years old. The official cause of death was listed as a heart attack, but the underlying cause was clearly related to his prescription drug abuse. An icon who had seemed untouchable, who had dominated pop culture for decades, was gone. His death marked the symbolic end of an era.
You can't see the tears of real life crying.
Elvis's decline in the 1970s represents what happened to many artists of that generation. Success, isolation, access to drugs, and a lack of support systems created a perfect storm. Elvis had everything except what he actually needed: genuine help and real intervention. His story became a cautionary tale about the costs of fame.
Because I love too much, baby.
Number 9. Sly Stone. Sly Stone was one of the most innovative artists of the late 1960s and early 1970s. His band, Sly and the Family Stone, created groundbreaking funk and soul music. Songs that remain classics today came from Sly's creative genius. But as the 1970s progressed, Sly's reliability became questionable. He started missing shows. He showed up late. He appeared intoxicated or high during performances. Sly's descent into drug addiction was rapid and visible. He was using cocaine regularly, and the drug's effects on his personality and behavior were dramatic. He became paranoid and erratic. Studio sessions became difficult because Sly couldn't stay focused. His record label waited for new music that never came. Awards shows booked him, and he didn't show up. By the mid-1970s, Sly Stone's career had effectively collapsed. The man who had been a major star just years earlier was now unreliable and unemployable. The music industry moved on. While Sly continued recording and performing sporadically, he never recaptured his earlier prominence. His addiction issues lasted decades. He became a cautionary tale about how quickly a career could unravel with addiction. What makes Sly's story particularly tragic is that he had genuine talent and had created genuinely important music. But addiction derailed everything. For those who remember his peak years, watching his decline was painful. Here was an artist who had changed music, who had created something innovative and lasting, but who couldn't overcome his demons. Number 8. Johnny Cash.
I fell into a ring of fire.
Johnny Cash was a legend even in the 1970s. He had survived decades in the music industry. But the 1970s were years of intense personal struggle for Cash. He was battling severe substance abuse. His addiction to amphetamines was out of control. He was also drinking heavily. The drugs and alcohol were destroying his health and his marriage.
I went down, 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 and the flames went higher.
Cash's addiction was no secret. He spent time in prison in the 1960s, and his legal troubles continued into the 1970s. He was arrested multiple times for drug possession. His behavior became unpredictable. He would show up at recording sessions unable to perform. He missed shows. His health deteriorated visibly. His weight fluctuated dramatically.
And it burns, 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 the ring of fire.
Despite his fame, and despite knowing people who cared about him, Cash couldn't seem to break free from his addiction. The substances had control of him. By the late 1970s, many people thought Cash was finished. His career seemed over. His life seemed like it was heading toward a tragic end.
I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down.
What distinguished Cash's story from some others is that he eventually recovered. He found sobriety. He found love. He returned to recording. But the 1970s were the darkest period of his life. He lost nearly everything during those years: his health, his family relationships, his career momentum. That he recovered is remarkable, but the fact remains that the 1970s nearly destroyed him.
And it burns, 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 the ring of fire.
Number 7. Iggy Pop.
Got lost for life.
Iggy Pop was the lead singer of the Stooges, one of the most influential rock bands of the late 1960s and early 1970s. But Iggy's life outside of music was chaotic and self-destructive. He was a heroin addict by the early 1970s. He was homeless at various points. He was arrested multiple times. His life was genuinely dangerous.
Got lost for life.
Iggy's performances were legendary for their intensity and unpredictability, but they were also reflections of his mental and physical state. He was erratic and unstable. The drugs were eating away at him physically and mentally. By the mid-1970s, Iggy Pop was at rock bottom. He was broke. He was struggling to survive. He was battling addiction. His music career seemed over. Iggy had brief moments of hope. He connected with David Bowie, and they made music together. Bowie tried to help Iggy recover, but the temptations of excess were always present. Iggy's addiction issues lasted years. For a while in the mid-1970s, it seemed like Iggy Pop's story would end tragically. He was living on the streets of Los Angeles, addicted to heroin, with no obvious path back to health or productivity.
Got lost for life.
What makes Iggy's story remarkable is that he survived. He got clean. He returned to making music. But the 1970s were years of genuine suffering. He lost everything: his home, his health, his dignity, his career prospects. That he recovered is a testament to his resilience and to the intervention of people like David Bowie, who believed in him.
Well, here comes Johnny again.
Number 6. Keith Richards.
I can't get no. No.
Keith Richards had survived more rock and roll excess than nearly anyone. But even Keith's legendary constitution was tested by the 1970s. The guitarist faced multiple drug arrests in the 1970s. He was convicted on drug charges. He faced prison time. His legal troubles consumed his energy and his finances. He had to hire expensive lawyers. The court cases dragged on. Keith's drug use was not just about personal addiction. It had legal consequences. In 1977, he was arrested in Toronto. This wasn't his first arrest, and the situation seemed dire. He faced serious prison time. His career seemed threatened. For a moment, it looked like Keith Richards might actually go to prison, and that his music career might be finished. Ultimately, Keith managed to avoid prison through a combination of luck and legal maneuvering. But the 1970s were years of intense legal and financial stress. He lost money to legal fees. He lost time and energy to court cases. He lived with the constant threat of incarceration. For a while, his future was genuinely uncertain. What's notable about Keith's survival is that it seemed almost miraculous. Here was someone engaging in extremely dangerous behavior, and yet he kept surviving. While others didn't make it through the era, Keith did. But he paid a significant price. The 1970s were years of legal jeopardy and personal chaos for one of rock and roll's greatest guitarists. Number 5. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye was one of the greatest soul singers of all time. His voice was extraordinary. His songs were beautiful and moving. But Marvin was also struggling. He had personal relationship issues. He had financial problems. His record label was pressuring him. The success he had achieved came with expectations he couldn't meet. By the mid-1970s, Marvin Gaye was dealing with depression and paranoia. He was struggling with substance abuse. He was becoming increasingly withdrawn. He missed recording sessions. He was difficult to work with. The man who had been a reliable, productive artist became unpredictable and unreliable. Record labels didn't know what to do with him. Marvin also faced legal and financial troubles. He was dealing with IRS issues. He had relationship problems. The pressures were mounting. By the late 1970s, Marvin was in serious personal and professional trouble. He lived in fear. He was paranoid about various threats. The mental health issues that plagued him were not being properly addressed. Marvin eventually recovered somewhat and released the album Midnight Love in 1982, which was successful. But the 1970s were a period of significant decline and struggle. He lost years of productivity. He lost his peace of mind. The combination of personal, professional, and financial problems nearly destroyed him. For years, it seemed like Marvin Gaye's best work was behind him. Number 4. Peter Frampton. Peter Frampton was one of the biggest stars of the mid-1970s. His album, Frampton Comes Alive, was one of the best-selling albums of the decade. He seemed untouchable. He was on magazine covers. He was mobbed by fans wherever he went. But the backlash came quickly and harshly. The very success that had elevated him became a target for criticism. Rock critics and musicians questioned whether his music had substance. He was seen as too commercial, too pretty, too pop. The rock establishment was uncomfortable with his level of mainstream success. Frampton's decline was as dramatic as his rise. The albums that followed, Frampton Comes Alive, didn't match its success. Critics panned his work mercilessly. The public lost interest almost overnight. He was seen as a one-album wonder, or as someone whose moment had passed. Record labels, which had competed for his attention just months earlier, suddenly lost interest. Tours sold fewer tickets. The money stopped flowing. The concert venues shrunk from arenas back to theaters. Peter Frampton also faced a serious car accident in early 1978 that resulted in significant injuries that affected his ability to perform. He was in a car driven by his friend, and the crash was severe. He spent time recovering from the physical injuries. The injuries to his back and other areas of his body created ongoing pain and limited his ability to tour. The physical injuries combined with the professional decline meant that by the end of the 1970s, Peter Frampton's career seemed over. He went from being one of the biggest stars in the world to struggling for relevance. What's important to note is that Frampton didn't necessarily lose everything through self-destruction. like some other artists on this list, but he lost nearly everything. Through changing musical tastes and the fickle nature of fame, he also faced real physical limitations from his accident. His story shows that sometimes the problem isn't addiction or death. Sometimes it's just that the world moves on and leaves you behind, and sometimes that's compounded by unfortunate circumstances beyond your control. Number 3. Ike Turner. Ike Turner was a legendary musician and producer. He had created incredible music with Tina Turner, but his career and reputation were destroyed by documented allegations of domestic violence against Tina Turner. In 1976, Tina left Ike and filed for divorce. She detailed the abuse she had suffered. The public revelation of his behavior changed everything. What had been private pain became public knowledge, and public condemnation followed. While Ike continued attempting to record and perform, his reputation was shattered. The music industry largely turned its back on him. Record deals dried up. Tour bookings disappeared. Clubs that had once been eager to book him became unavailable. He became a pariah in many circles. The man who had been an important figure in music history was now persona non grata. His contributions to rock and roll and soul music were overshadowed by the allegations and public perception of his character. Ike also struggled with cocaine addiction throughout the 1970s. The combination of the domestic violence allegations, the loss of Tina, the rejection from the industry, and the ongoing addiction issues created a perfect storm. He faced financial troubles as his income dried up. He faced legal troubles related to his behavior. The partnership that had defined his professional life was severed. Tina went on to rebuild her career and become successful on her own terms. Ike was left behind.
You know that big wheel keep on turning.
While Ike Turner did continue recording and had some comeback moments later, the 1970s saw him lose nearly everything: his marriage, his career momentum, and his reputation in a way that never fully recovered. For Ike Turner, the late 1970s were a period of profound loss and professional exile from an industry that had once celebrated him. Number 2. Karen Carpenter.
Why do birds suddenly appear?
Karen Carpenter was the voice of the Carpenters, one of the most successful musical groups of the 1970s. Her voice was beautiful and distinctive, but Karen was struggling with something that nobody really understood at the time: an eating disorder. In the 1970s, eating disorders weren't well known or well understood by the general public. The medical and psychological communities were still learning about these conditions. Karen's struggles were not public knowledge, and even many people close to her didn't fully understand what was happening. Privately, Karen was battling anorexia nervosa. She was starving herself. She was exercising excessively. She was taking laxatives. Her weight dropped dangerously. Her health was deteriorating. She wore baggy clothes to hide her weight loss. She made excuses for why she couldn't eat. She managed to keep her condition secret for years, though those closest to her began to notice changes. By the end of the 1970s, Karen's health was seriously compromised. The combination of her eating disorder and the stress of touring and performing was taking a toll. She was exhausted. She was weak. Her body was being destroyed by her eating disorder. She continued performing even as her health failed. Her family saw her declining but didn't know how to help. The doctors she saw didn't fully understand eating disorders or how to treat them effectively.
Why do stars fall down from the sky?
Karen's story didn't reach its tragic conclusion until 1983, when she died from complications of her eating disorder. But the disease was consuming her throughout the 1970s. By the end of the decade, everyone close to her knew something was seriously wrong. She had lost a dangerous amount of weight. Her health was visibly failing. Her energy was depleted. but nobody knew how to help. Karen was trapped in her illness, and the 1970s were the period when her eating disorder took control of her life and set in motion events that would lead to her death.
Close to you.
Number 1. Stevie Nicks. Stevie Nicks was the voice of Fleetwood Mac, one of the most successful bands of the 1970s. She was talented, glamorous, and widely admired. Her distinctive voice and stage presence made her one of the most recognizable women in rock music. But she was also struggling with cocaine addiction that was becoming increasingly serious. In the late 1970s, Stevie's cocaine use was reaching dangerous levels. The drug was affecting her health, her voice, and her behavior in ways that people close to her couldn't ignore. Stevie was using cocaine regularly by the late 1970s. She was smoking cocaine-laced cigarettes. The drug was damaging her vocal cords and her health. Her bandmates knew what was happening. Lindsey Buckingham knew. Mick Fleetwood knew. Christine McVie knew. The internal drama of Fleetwood Mac was partly related to drug use and the chaos it created. The tension within the band was exacerbated by everyone's substance abuse issues. Stevie was losing weight. She was becoming paranoid and erratic. The vibrant, talented young woman was being consumed by addiction. Her behavior became unpredictable, which affected the band's ability to record and perform consistently. By the end of the 1970s, Stevie Nicks was in serious trouble. She was addicted to cocaine. Her voice was being severely damaged from smoking cocaine-laced cigarettes. Her health was deteriorating. Recovery would require years of treatment and effort. The 1970s marked the beginning of a long struggle with substance abuse. She lost relationships with bandmates. She lost her peace of mind. The band continued touring and recording despite everyone's struggles. But it was an increasingly difficult situation. Stevie eventually achieved sobriety and returned to having a successful career. But the late 1970s marked the beginning of a dark period that would consume years of her life. She had to rebuild her physical health. She had to confront the reality of her addiction and its toll. The decline that began in the late 1970s would continue well into the 1980s before professional intervention finally helped her begin her recovery. Her story shows how even someone with tremendous talent and success could find herself trapped in addiction during an era when help was hard to find, and asking for it was stigmatized. What's important to recognize about all of these stories is that they represent real human suffering. These weren't just famous people having problems. These were people in genuine crisis. They were fighting addiction, mental health issues, legal troubles, and relationship problems. They were isolated by fame and wealth. They didn't have the support systems they needed. The 1970s music industry was brutal. There was little understanding of mental health or addiction. There were few resources for artists struggling with these issues. The culture celebrated excess and self-destruction. Many artists felt like they had to use drugs and alcohol to keep up with the demands of the industry or to cope with the pressures of fame. What's also notable is that several of these artists recovered. They survived their darkest periods and went on to have meaningful continued careers. But their stories remind us that fame is not protection against human suffering. If anything, fame can amplify suffering by creating isolation and providing easy access to drugs and alcohol. If these stories of 1970s music icons resonated with you, we'd love for you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We explore the real stories behind the music and musicians you grew up with. We look at the triumphs and the tragedies, the successes and the struggles. We examine what it actually cost these artists to achieve fame and what happened when things fell apart. On this channel, we dig into music history honestly. We don't just celebrate the hits. We also explore the darker side of the industry and the personal costs that many artists paid. We talk about addiction, mental health, and the challenges of managing fame. If you want to understand the full picture of music history and the human beings behind the music, subscribe and stay with us. Hit the notification bell so you're updated whenever we post new content. We've got more stories about music icons, more deep dives into music history, and more explorations of the real lives behind the famous names. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.